The lantern flickered against the canvas walls of the wagon as Adelaide Jenkins pressed herself into the corner, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs. Darkness was closing in fast over the Montana territory, and the other settlers gathered around the campfire were already making jokes at her expense, their laughter cutting through the evening air like knives. "Can you believe she is 20 years old and still afraid of the dark?" Sarah Mitchell called out, her voice carrying back to where Adelaide sat trembling. "My 6-year-old boy has more courage than that city girl." Adelaide felt her cheeks burn with shame, but the fear was stronger than her pride. It had been this way since she was 8, since the night her family's home in Philadelphia had caught fire, and she'd been trapped in the smoke-filled darkness for hours before her father found her. The fear had never left, growing roots deep in her soul until even the thought of nightfall without light made her stomach twist into knots. "Maybe we should just leave her here," another voice suggested, followed by more cruel laughter. "Dead weight on this wagon train anyway." Adelaide pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She had joined this wagon train heading to Hecla, Montana, in the spring of 1876, hoping to start a new life as a schoolteacher in the growing mining town. Her credentials were solid, her references impeccable, but none of that mattered to these people who had known hardship their whole lives. To them, she was just a frightened city girl who could not handle the realities of frontier life. The wagon master, a grizzled man named Thomas Crawford, had warned her that the journey would be difficult. What he had not mentioned was how the other settlers would treat her once they discovered her fear. 3 weeks into the journey, and she had become the joke of the entire caravan. "Please," she whispered to herself, lighting another candle even though she knew she should conserve her supply. "Just get through tonight." The settlement where they had stopped for the evening was barely more than a trading post at the edge of the Rockies. Tomorrow they would begin the treacherous climb through the mountain passes toward Hecla. Adelaide knew she should be resting, gathering her strength, but sleep felt impossible with the darkness pressing in from all sides. She was so focused on keeping her small circle of light alive that she did not hear the footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across the wagon opening. Adelaide gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Did not mean to startle you," a deep voice rumbled from outside. "Heard you might need some extra lamp oil." Adelaide's eyes adjusted to see a man standing there, though calling him simply a man seemed insufficient. He was enormous, easily 6 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the width of her wagon opening. His hair fell past his shoulders in dark waves, and a thick beard covered the lower half of his face. He wore buckskin clothing that had seen hard use, and his arms were bare below the elbows, revealing muscles that looked carved from granite. "I have enough oil," Adelaide managed to say, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. The man tilted his head, studying her with eyes that even in the dim light appeared to be a striking shade of gray. "Name is Owen Irwin. I'm a guide, trapper mostly. Crawford hired me to get this train through the passes safely. Mind if I come in for a moment?" Adelaide hesitated, then nodded. Owen pulled himself up into the wagon with an easy grace that belied his size. Inside the confined space, he seemed even larger, though he moved carefully to avoid knocking into her belongings. "The others say you are afraid of the dark," Owen said without preamble. His voice was not mocking, just stating a fact. Adelaide lifted her chin, preparing for more ridicule. "Yes, I'm aware that makes me weak in their eyes." "Did not say that." Owen settled himself on the floor of the wagon, his long legs folded in front of him. "Everyone is afraid of something. Seems to me that coming out here, knowing your fear, took more courage than most of those folks laughing around that fire will ever have." The kindness in his words caught Adelaide off guard. She found herself blinking back sudden tears. "You do not think I am foolish?" "I think you are human." Owen reached into the leather pack he carried and pulled out a large brass lantern, far sturdier than the tin one Adelaide had been using. "This belonged to my mother. She passed 5 years back, and I've been carrying it around since then, not quite sure what to do with it. Seems like maybe it found its purpose." He set the lantern down between them and lit it. The light that bloomed was strong and steady, pushing back the shadows more effectively than Adelaide's candles ever had. "I cannot accept this," Adelaide protested, even as her eyes drank in the blessed light. "It belonged to your mother." "Which is why I know she would want someone to use it who needs it." Owen stood, his head brushing the wagon top. "I will keep watch tonight. Make sure nothing bothers you. And tomorrow, when we head into the mountains, I will make sure you have enough oil to keep that lantern burning bright through every night until we reach Hecla." "Why would you do this for me?" Adelaide asked, searching his weathered face for some sign of ulterior motive. "You do not even know me." Owen paused at the wagon opening, looking back at her with an expression she could not quite read. "Maybe I am tired of people being cruel when they could choose kindness instead. Get some rest, Miss Jenkins. Tomorrow will be a hard day." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night as silently as he had appeared. Adelaide sat staring at the lantern, its steady flame seeming to pulse with warmth and promise. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, she felt a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, this journey would not be the mistake everyone told her it was. She did not know how long she sat there, but eventually exhaustion claimed her. Adelaide curled up on her bedroll, the lantern burning bright beside her, and fell into the first peaceful sleep she had experienced since the wagon train departed. When dawn broke over the mountains, Adelaide woke to find a small bundle outside her wagon. Inside was a leather pouch filled with lamp oil and a note written in surprisingly elegant script. "For the journey ahead, you are stronger than you know." The wagon train began moving at first light, and Adelaide found herself scanning the landscape for any sign of Owen. She finally spotted him riding ahead on a massive bay horse, consulting with the wagon master. Even from a distance, his presence seemed to command respect from the other scouts and guides. "That is the mountain man," a voice said beside her wagon. Adelaide looked down to see a young girl, maybe 10 years old, walking alongside. "My pa says he is the best tracker in the Montana Territory. Says Owen Irwin can find his way through any wilderness, even in the dead of night." "Is that so?" Adelaide asked, guiding her team of horses carefully along the narrow trail. The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Pa also says he is dangerous if you cross him wrong, but that he has a good heart underneath all those muscles. Saved a whole family from a grizzly bear last year, carried the injured father 10 miles to a doctor." Adelaide watched Owen's broad back as he led the wagon train higher into the mountains, a good heart underneath all those muscles. She found herself wondering what had brought a man like that to this harsh life, what stories were written in the scars she had glimpsed on his forearms. The day proved as difficult as Owen had predicted. The trail narrowed until the wagons were barely able to pass, with sheer rock walls on one side and steep drops on the other. Adelaide's hands ached from gripping the reins so tightly, and more than once she heard the other settlers muttering that she would never make it, that her wagon would end up at the bottom of a ravine. But every time Adelaide felt her courage failing, she would see Owen riding back along the line, checking on each wagon. When he reached hers, he would offer a small nod of encouragement or a quiet word of advice about the trail ahead. His presence was like an anchor in a storm, steady and unshakable. By the time they made camp that evening, Adelaide was exhausted. Her arms trembled from the strain of controlling the horses all day, and her back ached from the tension. But as darkness began to fall, the familiar fear crept back in, tightening around her chest like iron bands. She was fumbling with Owen's lantern, her hands shaking too badly to strike the match properly, when she heard the laughter start again. "Look at her," someone called out. "The sun is barely down and she's already panicking." "Pathetic," another voice agreed. "What kind of schoolteacher is Hecla getting? One who will run screaming from her own classroom when the lamp goes out." Adelaide felt hot tears spill down her cheeks. She hated that they could reduce her to this, hated the weakness that lived inside her like a poison. "That's enough." Owen's voice cut through the mockery like a blade. Adelaide looked up to see him standing at the edge of the firelight, his expression harder than the mountain stone around them. "Anyone else want to make jokes about Miss Jenkins?" The silence that fell was immediate and absolute. Owen's gray eyes swept the gathered settlers with a look that could freeze blood. "Thought not," he continued, his voice dangerously quiet. "Now, I have been guiding people through these mountains for 8 years, and I have seen grown men cry like babies when a storm hits at night. I have seen hardened miners freeze up at the sight of a rattlesnake. Everyone has something that scares them, and anyone who says different is either a liar or a fool." He moved toward Adelaide's wagon, and the crowd parted before him like water. "Miss Jenkins has more courage than the lot of you combined. She knows her fear and faces it anyway. She got up every morning of this journey and kept going even when you all made it clear you wanted her to fail. That is real strength. Owen climbed up to where Adelaide sat frozen in the wagon entrance. Without asking permission, he took the matches from her trembling hands and lit the lantern. The flame caught and held, pushing back the gathering darkness. "I will keep this lantern burning bright," Owen said, his voice gentler now, meant only for her. "Every night until we reach Hecla, I will make sure you have light. You have my word." Adelaide found her voice at last. "You do not have to do this." "I know." Owen's gray eyes met hers, and Adelaide felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the lantern's flame. "But I want to." The next weeks passed in a blur of difficult trails and spectacular mountain vistas. True to his word, Owen appeared at Adelaide's wagon every evening as the sun began to set. He would light her lantern, check that she had enough oil, and then settle himself nearby to keep watch. Sometimes he would sit in silence, working on repairing his gear or sharpening his hunting knife. Other times he would talk, his deep voice sharing stories of the wilderness and the creatures that called it home. Adelaide found herself living for those evening visits. Owen's presence did more than just keep her fear at bay. He made her feel seen in a way she never had before, as if her fear was not a character flaw, but simply one part of a complex person. When he looked at her, she did not feel diminished or weak. She felt valued. "Why did you become a trapper?" Adelaide asked one evening as they sat outside her wagon. The other settlers had long since stopped their mockery, cowed into silence by Owen's fierce defense of her. Now they mostly ignored Adelaide, which she found infinitely preferable. Owen was quiet for a long moment, his hands working a piece of leather into a new sheath for his knife. "My father was a trapper. Taught me everything about living in these mountains. When he died, it felt right to follow his path. Out here, things make sense. You treat the land with respect it provides for you. You work hard, you survive. It is simpler than trying to fit into civilized society." "Do you not get lonely?" Adelaide asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I apologize. That was too forward." "No, it is a fair question." Owen's hand stilled on his work. "I suppose I do sometimes, but I have never been good with people the way I am with the wilderness. People are complicated. They say one thing and mean another. The mountains are honest." Adelaide considered this. "I think you are better with people than you believe. You have been nothing but kind to me." Owen looked up at her then, and in the lantern light, his eyes seemed to hold entire worlds. "You are different, Adelaide. You do not hide what you are." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool mountain air. "The others think I am weak," Adelaide said softly. "The others are wrong." Owen set aside his work and shifted closer, close enough that Adelaide could feel the warmth radiating from his large frame. Strength is not about having no fear. It is about moving forward despite the fear. You do that every single day. "Only because you are here," Adelaide admitted. "The lantern helps, but it is more than that. When you are near, I feel safe. Like nothing can touch me as long as you are keeping watch." Owen's expression shifted into something Adelaide could not quite name. His hand reached out, hovering near her face as if he wanted to touch her, but was not sure he had the right. "Adelaide, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "When I first took this job, I thought it would be like all the others. Guide some settlers through the mountains, collect my pay, move on. But then I heard you in your wagon that first night, so afraid but so determined not to let it beat you. And when I saw how the others treated you, something in me just—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "I've not been able to stop thinking about you, about whether you will be all right in Hecla, whether someone will be there to light your lantern when I am gone." Adelaide's heart was racing now, and for once the feeling was not from fear, but from something else entirely, something that felt like hope and yearning mixed together. "I've been thinking about you too," she confessed, "more than I probably should." Owen's hand finally made contact, his calloused fingers brushing her cheek with surprising gentleness. "I'm not a refined man, Adelaide. I live rough, and I do not have pretty words or fancy manners. But I can promise you this. If you wanted, I would make sure you never had to face the darkness alone again." I would keep your lantern burning bright every night for the rest of our lives." The declaration hung in the air between them, enormous and terrifying and wonderful all at once. Adelaide knew she should be cautious, should take time to think this through logically. They had known each other barely a month, but when she looked at Owen with his honest eyes and his strong hands and his fierce protectiveness, logic seemed like a distant concern. "I would like that," Adelaide whispered. "I would like that very much." Owen's face broke into a smile that transformed his stern features into something beautiful. Then he was leaning in, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted, but Adelaide found herself meeting him halfway. His kiss was gentle despite his size, reverent even, and when they finally pulled apart, Adelaide felt as if the entire world had shifted on its axis. "We will figure this out," Owen promised, his forehead resting against hers. "When we reach Hecla, I will find work nearby. I can still guide and trap, but I will always come back to you. I will build us a home with windows facing east so you can wake to the sunrise, and I will install lanterns in every room so you never have to be afraid." Tears streamed down Adelaide's cheeks, but for once they were tears of joy rather than fear or shame. "You would do that for me?" "Adelaide, I would move mountains for you if you asked. Keeping some lanterns lit is easy by comparison." They sat together long into the night, talking about the future they would build together. Owen told her about a piece of land near Hecla that he had been considering for years, a beautiful spot with a stream running through it and a view of the mountains that took the breath away. Adelaide described the school she hoped to establish, her dreams of teaching the children of miners and settlers, of bringing education to the rough frontier town. As dawn approached, Owen reluctantly stood to begin his scouting duties, but before he left, he pulled Adelaide into his arms, and she marveled at how safe she felt there, surrounded by all that strength and muscle and gentleness. "I love you," Owen said simply. "I know it is fast, but I also know it is true. I have loved you since that first night when you lifted your chin and refused to apologize for being afraid." "I love you too," Adelaide replied, the words feeling right and true on her tongue. "I did not know I could feel this way about anyone, but here we are." Owen kissed her again, deeper this time, a promise of all the nights to come. Then he swung up onto his horse and rode ahead to scout the trail, leaving Adelaide watching after him with a heart so full she thought it might burst. The final week of the journey passed in a haze of happiness. The mountains were still treacherous, the days still long and exhausting, but Adelaide faced each challenge with newfound determination. She was not just traveling to start a teaching position anymore. She was journeying toward a life with Owen, toward a future that glowed as bright as the lantern he faithfully lit for her each evening. The other settlers noticed the change between them, of course. Some of the women approached Adelaide with newfound respect, curious about the mountain man who had claimed her heart. Adelaide answered their questions as best she could, though, in truth, she was still discovering new things about Owen every day. She learned that he could play the harmonica beautifully, though he was shy about performing in front of groups. She discovered that he had a wicked sense of humor, dry and unexpected, that made her laugh until her sides ached. She found out that despite his rough exterior, he had a collection of books in his cabin, including poetry by Wordsworth and essays by Thoreau. "You are full of surprises," Adelaide told him one evening as they walked together along the ridge above the wagon train. "So are you," Owen replied, his hand engulfing hers as they walked. "I never expected to find a city woman who could handle 3 weeks in the mountains without complaint." "Oh, I have complaints," Adelaide said with a laugh. "My back aches, my hands are covered in blisters, and I am fairly certain I have worn the same dress far too many times, but I would not trade this journey for anything." Owen stopped walking and pulled her close, his massive frame blocking out the setting sun. "When we reach Hecla tomorrow, there will be things we need to do. You have to report to the school board. I need to file some claims and handle business with my trapping partners. But the day after that, will you come see the land I told you about? I want to show you where I hope we can build our life together." "Yes," Adelaide breathed. "I cannot wait." That night, as the wagon train made its final camp before reaching Hecla, Owen built a large bonfire in the center of the circle. He gathered all the settlers around and made an announcement that shocked Adelaide to her core. "Most of you know me as just a guide and trapper," Owen began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. But there is something I need to say publicly before we reach town tomorrow. Adelaide Jenkins, would you come here, please?" Adelaide's legs felt shaky as she stood and made her way to where Owen waited. The entire wagon train watched in fascinated silence. Owen took both her hands in his gray eyes locked on hers. "Adelaide, I know we have not known each other long by conventional standards, but I have lived in these mountains for more than a decade, and I have learned to recognize truth when I see it. You are the truth I have been searching for my whole life." He dropped to one knee, and Adelaide heard gasps from the watching crowd. From his pocket, Owen pulled a ring that gleamed in the firelight. It was simple but beautiful, a silver band with a small diamond that caught the light. "This was my mother's ring," Owen said. "The only thing of value my father gave her, and she treasured it until the day she died. I want you to have it now, if you will accept it. Adelaide Jenkins, will you marry me? Will you let me keep your lantern burning bright for the rest of our days?" Adelaide could not speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded frantically, tears streaming down her face as Owen stood and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The wagon train erupted in cheers and applause. Even those who had mocked Adelaide in the early days of the journey seemed genuinely happy for them. Owen swept Adelaide into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, not caring who was watching. That night they celebrated with music and dancing. Someone produced a fiddle, and the settlers who had been strangers weeks ago now felt like family. Owen danced with Adelaide under the stars, moving with surprising grace for such a large man, and Adelaide felt as if she were living in a dream. "I never thought I could be this happy," she told him as they swayed together. "A month ago I was alone and afraid, convinced I had made a terrible mistake coming west. Now I have you and a future that looks brighter than anything I imagined." "We will have a good life," Owen promised. "It will not always be easy. The winters here are hard and frontier living takes work. But we will face it together, and that will make all the difference." They arrived in Hecla the next afternoon to find a town much larger than Adelaide had expected. The discovery of gold in the nearby mountains had brought prospectors flooding in, and the population had swelled to several thousand people. Buildings lined the main street, including a newly constructed schoolhouse that took Adelaide's breath away. It is beautiful," she said, staring at the white-painted building with its bell tower and large windows. "Better than anything I dreamed of." The school board members who greeted her were a mix of miners, merchants, and their wives. They explained that Hecla had grown so quickly that they desperately needed teachers. Adelaide's credentials had impressed them, and they had high hopes for what she could accomplish. "We have over 40 children who need educating," the board president, a stern woman named Margaret Walsh, explained. "Ages 5 through 15. It will be challenging work, Miss Jenkins." "Mrs. Irwin, actually," Adelaide corrected with a shy smile. "Or rather, I will be soon. I became engaged last night." This caused quite a stir until Owen stepped forward to confirm the news. His reputation had preceded him to Hecla, and the board members treated him with clear respect. When they learned Adelaide would be marrying the famous mountain man Owen Irwin, their enthusiasm for her appointment only increased. "A woman who can win the heart of Owen Irwin is clearly made of strong stuff," Margaret said approvingly. "When will the wedding be?" Owen looked at Adelaide, one eyebrow raised in question. Adelaide considered for only a moment before saying, "As soon as possible. We have already waited long enough." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small church that served Hecla's growing population. Adelaide wore a new dress purchased from the town's general store, a lovely blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Owen wore his best buckskin jacket and pants, and someone had convinced him to trim his beard and tie back his long hair. But when Adelaide walked down the aisle and saw him waiting for her at the altar, she thought he looked perfect exactly as he was. His gray eyes shone with love and promise, and the smile that crossed his face when he saw her made her heart skip several beats. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed Adelaide with such tenderness that several women in the congregation wiped away tears. Afterward, the whole town seemed to turn out for the celebration, with tables of food set up in the street and more music and dancing. "I cannot believe this is real," Adelaide told Owen as they danced together in the fading sunlight. "A month ago, I was alone in a wagon, terrified of the dark and ashamed of my fear. Now I am married to the most incredible man I have ever known, in a town that actually wants me here." "Believe it," Owen said, pulling her closer. "This is just the beginning, Adelaide. We have a whole lifetime ahead of us." True to his word, Owen took Adelaide to see his land the next morning. They rode together on his large bay horse, Adelaide seated in front of him with Owen's strong arms around her. The ride took them into the foothills east of Hecla, following a creek that bubbled over smooth stones. When they crested a rise and Adelaide saw the valley spread out before them, she actually gasped aloud. It was perfect. A meadow stretched beside the creek, surrounded by pine forests, with the mountains rising majestically in the distance. The morning sun painted everything in shades of gold and green. "This is yours?" Adelaide asked in wonder. "Ours," Owen corrected. "I filed the claim yesterday. 200 acres of the most beautiful land in Montana Territory. I thought we could build the house there, where the meadow meets the trees. We would have shelter from winter storms, but still catch the morning sun." They dismounted and walked the property together, with Owen pointing out where different buildings could go. The house, a barn for horses and livestock, perhaps a workshop where Adelaide could have space for her school planning during the summer months. His vision was so clear and detailed that Adelaide could almost see the structures rising from the ground. "When can we start building?" she asked eagerly. Owen's expression turned slightly guilty. "That is the thing I need to tell you. I have to leave for about 3 weeks. I have a trapping contract that was arranged months ago, and I cannot break it without losing reputation I have spent years building. But when I get back, we will start construction immediately. I have already hired a crew, and I'm having lumber delivered while I am gone." Adelaide's stomach dropped at the thought of Owen leaving, but she forced herself to be reasonable. This was his livelihood, and she had known when she married him that his work would sometimes take him into the mountains for extended periods. "I understand," she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "I will be busy with the school anyway. Classes start in 2 weeks, and I have much to prepare." Owen pulled her into his arms, his chin resting on the top of her head. "I do not want to go. If there was any way to get out of this contract honorably, I would. But I promise you, Adelaide, this is the last trip I will take without you. After this, we find a way to make the work fit around our life together." They spent the rest of the day exploring their land, making plans, and dreaming aloud about their future. Owen showed Adelaide a stand of aspen trees that turned brilliant gold in autumn, and a spot near the creek where wild roses grew in summer. Every detail he shared made Adelaide fall more deeply in love with both the land and the man beside her. That evening, Owen took Adelaide to a small cabin at the edge of Hecla, where he had been staying when he was not in the mountains. It was sparse but clean, with a single room that held a bed, table, and wood stove. But what caught Adelaide's attention immediately were the lanterns. Owen had installed 4 of them throughout the small space, each one carefully positioned to provide maximum light. On the table sat a large box filled with lamp oil, enough to last for months. "I told you I would make sure you always had light," Owen said, watching her reaction carefully. "This is just temporary until we build our house, but I wanted you to feel safe here while I am gone." Adelaide turned to him with tears in her eyes. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I think I am the lucky one," Owen replied, pulling her close. "You took a broken-down mountain man and made him believe in things like love and home and future. That is a kind of magic, Adelaide." They made love for the first time that night in the small cabin, with the lanterns burning bright around them and the Montana night pressing close outside. Owen was gentle despite his size, reverent even, treating Adelaide's body like something precious and sacred. And Adelaide discovered that in his arms, with his strength surrounding her and his love evident in every touch, even the darkness held no terror. The 3 weeks that Owen was gone proved to be some of the longest of Adelaide's life. She threw herself into preparing the schoolhouse, organizing books and supplies, meeting with parents and children. The townspeople of Hecla were welcoming, and several women made efforts to befriend the new schoolteacher. But every evening when darkness fell, Adelaide found herself missing Owen with an intensity that surprised her. She kept the lanterns burning exactly as he had left them, finding comfort in the steady flames. And each night before bed, She would light the brass lantern that had belonged to Owen's mother and remember how his mother's kindness had brought them together. Letters arrived from Owen via trappers passing through Hecla. They were brief but heartfelt, full of promises about how much he missed her and plans for the house they would build together. Adelaide treasured each one, reading them over and over until the paper grew soft from handling. School began during Owen's absence, and Adelaide discovered she loved teaching even more than she had imagined. The children of Hecla were eager to learn despite their rough backgrounds. She had miners' sons sitting beside shopkeepers' daughters and children of varying ages, all learning together in one room. It was challenging work, but deeply rewarding. One of her students was a girl of about 10 named Emma, who reminded Adelaide of herself at that age. Emma was bright and curious, but painfully shy, and Adelaide noticed how the other children sometimes teased her for being too bookish. Adelaide made a special effort to encourage Emma, staying after class to answer her endless questions about literature and history. "Miss Adelaide, I mean Mrs. Irwin," Emma said one afternoon as she helped Adelaide clean the classroom. "Is it true your husband is the mountain man everyone talks about?" "It is true," Adelaide confirmed with a smile. "Why do you ask?" Emma's face turned serious. "My pa says Owen Irwin is the toughest man in Montana Territory. Says he has fought off wolves and bears and survived storms that killed other men. But you do not seem scared of him at all." Adelaide sat down at one of the small desks, gesturing for Emma to join her. "Being tough and being mean are not the same thing, Emma. Owen is strong and capable, yes, but he is also the kindest, most gentle man I have ever known. He uses his strength to protect people, not to hurt them." "Like a knight in one of the stories you read us," Emma said, her eyes lighting up with understanding. "Exactly like that," Adelaide agreed. "And the most amazing thing is that he sees strength in me too, even though I am not big or tough. He taught me that there are different kinds of courage, and that being afraid of something does not make you weak." Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked shyly, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I'm scared of horses," Emma admitted, her cheeks flushing with shame. "Everyone else in town can ride, but I get so frightened when I try. My brothers make fun of me for it." Adelaide reached out and took Emma's hand. "Thank you for trusting me with that. And Emma, there's nothing wrong with being afraid of horses. They are very large animals, and it makes sense to be cautious around them. But if you want to learn to ride, we can work on it together. Small steps at your own pace. Sound good?" Emma nodded, relief evident on her young face. Adelaide made a mental note to talk to Owen about giving Emma riding lessons when he returned. She had a feeling he would be just as patient and encouraging with the girl as he had been with Adelaide's fear of darkness. Owen returned on a crisp October afternoon, exactly 3 weeks after he had left. Adelaide was walking home from the schoolhouse when she heard the thunder of hoofbeats and looked up to see him riding down Hecla's main street. Her heart leaped at the sight of him, and she dropped the book she was carrying to run toward him. Owen dismounted in one fluid motion and caught Adelaide in his arms, lifting her off her feet as if she weighed nothing. He kissed her desperately, and Adelaide kissed him back with equal fervor, not caring that half the town was watching. "I missed you so much," Owen said against her hair when they finally broke apart. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. "I missed you too," Adelaide replied, her hands roaming over his chest and shoulders as if to reassure herself that he was really there. "How was the trip?" "Profitable but miserable. I spent every night thinking about you, wondering if you were all right, if the lanterns were still burning." Owen set her down carefully, but kept his arms around her. "Tell me everything. How's the school? How are you?" They walked back to the cabin together, Adelaide chattering about her students and the lessons she had been teaching while Owen listened with evident interest. Once inside, he made a thorough inspection of the lanterns, refilling oil and checking wicks as if they were precious artifacts. "You kept them all going," he said with satisfaction. "I knew you would." "They made me feel close to you," Adelaide admitted, "like you were here keeping watch even when you were miles away in the mountains." Owen pulled her into his arms again, and this time, when he kissed her, there was a hunger that had been banked during their separation. They made their way to the bed, shedding clothes along the way, and reaffirmed their connection in the most fundamental way possible. Afterward, lying tangled together in the lamplight, Owen traced lazy patterns on Adelaide's shoulder and shared his plans for the house. "Construction starts tomorrow. I know you have school during the day, but can you come to the land in the evenings? I want your input on everything." "I would not miss it," Adelaide promised. The next months were a blur of activity. Adelaide taught during the day while Owen and his construction crew worked on building their house. True to his word, Owen consulted her on every decision, from the placement of windows to the design of the kitchen. Adelaide insisted on a dedicated room for a library, and Owen surprised her by adding a workshop space where she could prepare lessons and store school supplies. The house took shape with remarkable speed. Owen's reputation meant he could hire the best craftsmen in the area, and his own skill with woodworking was evident in the careful details throughout the structure. He built sturdy furniture designed to last generations and carved Adelaide's name into the mantel above the large stone fireplace. But the detail that meant the most to Adelaide was the lanterns. True to his promise, Owen installed brass lanterns in every single room of the house. The main living area had 3, the bedroom had 2, and even the kitchen and workshop had their own sources of light. He ran a pipeline from a large oil tank installed behind the house, ensuring they would never run short of fuel. "You will never have to be afraid in this house," Owen told her as he gave her the first tour of the completed interior. "Even if I am not physically here, the light will be. You will always be safe." Adelaide stood in the center of their new home, turning slowly to take in the beautiful space Owen had created for them. The late afternoon sun streamed through the large windows facing east, just as he had promised. The furniture was solid and well made, built to accommodate Owen's large frame, but with delicate touches that showed he had been thinking of her comfort too. "It is perfect," she whispered. "Owen, it is absolutely perfect." They moved into the house in early December, just as the first serious snows began to fall on the Montana mountains. Adelaide had worried that the isolation would be difficult, but she found she loved the quiet peace of their land. The school was only a 30-minute ride away, easily manageable even in winter weather, and the house stayed warm and cozy thanks to the efficient heating system Owen had designed. Christmas that year was the happiest Adelaide could remember. She and Owen cut down a pine tree from their own land and decorated it with strings of popcorn and handmade ornaments. Adelaide gave Owen a new hunting knife with his initials carved into the handle, while Owen presented her with a stunning gold locket that held a tiny photograph of the two of them taken by Hekla's traveling photographer. "So you can always keep me close to your heart," Owen said as he fastened it around her neck. They spent the holiday curled together by the fireplace, with lanterns burning bright around them and snow falling softly outside the windows. Adelaide read aloud from her collection of Dickens, while Owen worked on repairing some leather gear, and she thought there was nothing more perfect than this simple domestic contentment. The winter months proved challenging in ways Adelaide had not anticipated. Hekla was frequently cut off from other towns by heavy snows, and temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid in minutes. But Owen had prepared well, and their house remained a warm haven against the brutal weather. Adelaide continued teaching throughout the winter, though some days only the children who lived in town could make it through the snow. On those days, Owen would ride with her to ensure she arrived safely, and he would return in the afternoon to escort her home. The other teachers and townspeople commented on how protective he was, but Adelaide never felt smothered by his attention. Instead, she felt cherished and valued. Emma, the shy girl Adelaide had befriended, became a regular visitor to their home on weekends. Owen kept his promise about riding lessons, working with Emma until she gained confidence around horses. Adelaide watched from the porch as Owen patiently taught the girl, his massive frame somehow gentle, as he showed her how to approach the animals without fear. "You are so good with her," Adelaide told him one evening after Emma's mother had collected her. "I think you would make an excellent father." Owen had been stoking the fire, but at her words, he turned to look at her with an expression of such hope and longing that Adelaide's breath caught. "Is that something you have been thinking about?" "I've been thinking about it a lot lately," Adelaide admitted. "I always wanted children, but I was not sure I would make a good mother given my fears. But watching you with Emma, seeing how patient and kind you are, I think maybe we could do this together." Owen crossed the room in 3 long strides and pulled Adelaide into his arms. "I would love nothing more than to have children with you, a whole house full of them if you are willing. And Adelaide, you would be an amazing mother. You already are to those students who need extra care and attention." Then maybe we should stop being so careful, Adelaide suggested, her cheeks flushing at her own boldness. Owen's answer was to kiss her deeply and carry her to their bedroom, where they spent the night making love with a new purpose and joy. Spring came late to Montana that year, but when it finally arrived, it transformed their land into something magical. Wildflowers bloomed in the meadow, the creek swelled with snowmelt, and new life seemed to burst from every corner of the property. Adelaide discovered she was pregnant in late April, and Owen's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He literally whooped with joy when she told him, then immediately became concerned about her health and comfort. He insisted on doing all the heavy work around the house and farm, despite Adelaide's protests that she was perfectly capable. He rode to town and returned with books on pregnancy and childbirth, determined to understand every stage of what Adelaide's body would go through. "I am not made of glass," Adelaide finally told him after he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know," Owen said, looking slightly sheepish. "I just want everything to be perfect for you and the baby. I want you both safe and healthy and happy." Adelaide's heart melted at the vulnerability in his voice. She pulled him down to sit beside her on the porch swing he had built. "We will be safe because you are here, and we will be happy because we are together. That is all that matters, Owen." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through spring and summer. Adelaide continued teaching until June, when the school year ended, and then spent the hot summer months preparing the nursery and adjusting to the changes in her body. Owen was attentive to the point of being comical, constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. He installed 3 lanterns in the nursery, along with cheerful yellow curtains and a rocking chair he had carved himself. When Adelaide asked why a newborn needed so many light sources, Owen looked at her seriously and said, "So our child never has to be afraid of the dark either. So they grow up knowing that in this house there is always light." Adelaide cried at that, hormones making her more emotional than usual, but they were happy tears. She thought about the terrified woman she had been just over a year ago, certain she was too weak and broken to survive the frontier. And now, here she was, growing new life inside her, building a family with a man who saw her fear and loved her anyway. The baby came in early October, during one of those perfect autumn days when the aspen trees turned the hillsides to gold. Adelaide had been hanging laundry when her water broke, and Owen had been at her side in seconds, his face a mixture of excitement and barely controlled panic. "I need to get you to town," he said, already reaching to lift her. "There is time," Adelaide assured him, though she was breathing through the first contraction. "Babies do not come instantly. Send someone to fetch the midwife and tell her to come here. I want to have our baby at home." Owen looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Adelaide's expression made him nod instead. He settled her in their bed, surrounded by lanterns burning bright, and then rode like the wind to Hecla to fetch Clara Montgomery, the experienced midwife who delivered most of the town's babies. Clara arrived within 2 hours, her calm competence immediately soothing Adelaide's growing anxiety. Owen paced outside the bedroom like a caged mountain lion, and Clara finally took pity on him and allowed him to stay if he could be useful. "Hold her hand and let her squeeze as hard as she needs to," Clara instructed. "And Owen Irwin, if you faint on me, I will never let you live it down." "I have field-dressed elk and survived blizzards," Owen said with dignity. "I can handle this." He was true to his word, remaining steady and supportive throughout the long hours of labor. When Adelaide squeezed his hand so hard she thought she might break his bones, Owen never flinched. When she screamed through contractions, he murmured encouragement and wiped her forehead with cool cloths. And when their son finally entered the world with a lusty cry just after midnight, Owen openly wept with joy. "You have a healthy boy," Clara announced, wrapping the baby in soft blankets. "Strong lungs on this one. He will be a vocal child." Adelaide held her son for the first time and felt her entire world shift to revolve around this tiny, perfect human. He had a shock of dark hair like his father, and when he opened his eyes, they were a deep blue that might eventually turn to Owen's striking gray. "What should we name him?" Owen asked, his large hand gently stroking the baby's downy head. Adelaide had been thinking about this for months. "What was your father's name?" "Oliver," Owen said softly. "Oliver John Irwin. He was a good man, taught me everything I know about living in harmony with this land. Then we should name our son after him, Adelaide decided. Oliver James Irwin, James for my father. Owen looked at her with such love and gratitude that Adelaide felt her eyes fill with tears again. That is perfect. Oliver James Irwin. Welcome to the world, son. The first months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Oliver was indeed a vocal baby, waking frequently through the night and demanding attention with impressive lung power. But even during those difficult sleep-deprived weeks, Adelaide never once felt afraid of the darkness. Owen was always there, lighting lanterns and walking the floor with Oliver while Adelaide rested, his deep voice singing old frontier songs that somehow always soothed the baby. Adelaide returned to teaching in January, bringing Oliver with her to school. The children were delighted to have a baby in the classroom, and the older girls fought over who got to help care for him. Emma, now 12 and much more confident than she'd been 2 years ago, proved to be especially helpful, entertaining Oliver whenever Adelaide needed both hands for teaching. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the next few years. Owen continued his work as a guide and trapper, though he turned down longer contracts that would take him far from home. Instead, he took day trips into the mountains, teaching Oliver about wilderness skills as soon as the boy was old enough to walk. Adelaide watched her husband and son together and marveled at Owen's patience, the way he explained every plant and animal track as if Oliver's childish questions were the most important things in the world. They had 2 more children in quick succession, a daughter named Anna Grace, born in 1879, and another son named August William in 1881. Their house filled with laughter and noise, with toys scattered across the floor and small muddy footprints tracked in from outside. Owen added onto the house to accommodate their growing family, building additional bedrooms and a larger kitchen. But no matter how chaotic life became, Owen never forgot his promise about the lanterns. Every evening at sunset, he would light them throughout the house, ensuring Adelaide always had the light she needed to feel safe. And as the children grew, he taught them the importance of those rituals, of how their mother needed that light and how it was everyone's job to help maintain it. "Why does Mama need so many lanterns?" Oliver asked one evening when he was about 7 years old. They were in the barn doing evening chores, and Owen had just lit the lantern that hung near the door. Owen paused in his work, considering how to explain this to his son. "Your mama has a fear of the dark that started when she was just a little girl. Something scary happened to her, and ever since then, darkness makes her feel unsafe. So I promised her I would always keep lanterns burning bright, so she would never have to be afraid again." Oliver thought about this seriously. "But you are not scared of anything, Pa. You fight bears and wolves." "That is not quite true, son. I'm scared of plenty of things. I'm scared of something happening to you kids or to your mama. I'm scared of not being a good enough father or husband. Everyone has fears, Oliver. The difference is in how we handle them." "How should we handle them?" Oliver asked. Owen smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "We face them when we can. And when we cannot face them alone, we ask for help from people who love us. Your mama was brave enough to do that, and it is one of the reasons I fell in love with her." This conversation seemed to make a deep impression on Oliver. Adelaide noticed that he started taking responsibility for lighting lanterns in the evening without being asked, carefully tending the flames as he had seen his father do. Anna and August followed their brother's example as they grew older, until maintaining the lanterns became a family tradition that no one questioned. Adelaide continued teaching for over a decade, becoming one of the most respected educators in the Montana Territory. Her school expanded to include a second teacher, and eventually they built a larger schoolhouse to accommodate Hecla's growing population. But Adelaide always made time for students who needed extra help, especially those who, like her and Emma, struggled with fears that others did not understand. Emma herself grew into a confident young woman who became a teacher in a neighboring town. She wrote to Adelaide often, crediting her former teacher with showing her that fear and strength could coexist, that being gentle was not the same as being weak. "You changed my life," Emma wrote in one letter. "You and Mr. Irwin both showed me what real courage looks like. Now I try to do the same for my students." Adelaide cried when she read that letter, thinking about the frightened city girl she had been when she first arrived in Montana. She had thought herself too weak for frontier life, too damaged by her fears to be of use to anyone. but Owen had seen past those fears to the strength beneath, and in doing so, he had given her the courage to become who she was meant to be. As the children grew and became more independent, Adelaide and Owen found themselves with more time to simply enjoy each other's company. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over their land while the children played in the meadow. Owen would hold Adelaide close, and she would marvel at how safe she always felt in his arms. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked one evening when they were alone. "Taking on a wife with so much baggage, committing yourself to lighting lanterns every night for the rest of your life?" Owen turned to look at her with those steady gray eyes that had first captured her heart. "Not for a single second. Adelaide, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I was just surviving, moving through life without real purpose or joy. You gave me a family, a home, a reason to be more than just a mountain man. If keeping a few lanterns lit is the price for that, I got the better end of the deal by far." "I love you," Adelaide said, the words never losing their power even after years of marriage. "I love you so much it still takes my breath away sometimes." "I love you too," Owen replied, "and I promise you, Adelaide Irwin, I will keep these lanterns burning bright until the day I die. You will never have to face the darkness alone." The years passed with the steady rhythm of seasons. Oliver grew into a young man who combined his father's skill in the wilderness with his mother's love of learning. He became a teacher himself, working in Hekla's expanded school system. Anna proved to have her father's way with animals and started breeding horses on land adjacent to her parents' property. August discovered a talent for medicine and went east to study, though he promised to return to practice in Montana. Adelaide and Owen grew older together, their hair turning silver, but their love remaining as strong as it had been that first night when a mountain man had appeared at a frightened woman's wagon with a lantern and a promise. Owen's body bore the marks of his hard life, with joints that ached in cold weather and scars from countless adventures, but he remained strong and capable, still able to chop wood and tend their land. Adelaide's fear of the dark never fully went away, even after decades of safety in Owen's care. But she no longer felt ashamed of it. Instead, she viewed it as part of her story, the thing that had brought her to Montana and ultimately led her to Owen. She told her grandchildren about it, explaining how their grandfather had seen her fear and responded with compassion instead of mockery. "The measure of a person," she told them, "is not whether they have fears, but how they treat others who are afraid." On their 25th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Adelaide with a new lantern for their bedroom. It was larger and more ornate than the others, with stained glass panels that cast colored light across the walls when lit. "I had it specially made," Owen explained as Adelaide admired the beautiful craftsmanship. "I wanted something that would remind you every night of my promise. I will keep the lantern burning bright, Adelaide, always." They held a large party to celebrate the anniversary, with children and grandchildren and half the town of Hekla attending. People came from miles around to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the area. The Mountain Man and the Schoolteacher, they were called, their love story told and retold until it took on almost mythical qualities. But to Adelaide and Owen, it was simply their life, a life built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and the promise that no matter how dark the world became, there would always be light. Adelaide continued teaching until she was nearly 60, finally retiring when arthritis made holding a pen difficult. Owen scaled back his wilderness work around the same time, though he still took occasional trips into the mountains with his sons and grandsons. Their house remained a gathering place for family, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the warmth of multiple generations coming together. One summer evening when Adelaide was 65 and Owen was 68, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The lanterns inside the house were already lit, as they had been every evening for over 30 years, their steady glow visible through the windows. "Do you remember the first time you lit a lantern for me?" Adelaide asked, her hand clasped in Owen's weathered one. "Like it was yesterday," Owen replied. "You were so scared and trying so hard not to show it, and those people were being cruel, making jokes about something you could not help. I just knew I had to do something." "You did more than something," Adelaide said softly. "You saved me, Owen, not just from the darkness, but from believing I was broken beyond repair. You showed me that being afraid did not make me weak, that I could still be strong and capable and worthy of love. Owen lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. You were always worthy of love, Adelaide. I just happened to be lucky enough to be the one who got to show you. They sat in companionable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to emerge overhead. Inside their home, the lanterns burned steadily, their light a promise kept thousands of times over the course of more than 3 decades. I will keep the lantern burning bright, Owen murmured, the words as familiar as a prayer. Every night, for as long as I have breath in my body. I know you will, Adelaide replied, resting her head on his broad shoulder. You always do. As the years continued to pass, Owen's health began to decline more noticeably. Nothing catastrophic, just the slow wearing down that came with a life lived hard in harsh conditions. His steps became slower, his hands less steady. But every evening, without fail, he still lit the lanterns throughout their house, refusing to let anyone else take over that sacred duty. It is my promise to keep, he told Oliver when their son suggested taking over the evening ritual. Your mother trusted me with this task, and I will honor that trust until I cannot anymore. Adelaide worried about him, about the toll it took on his aging body to maintain all those lanterns every night, but she also understood that this was more than just a chore for Owen. It was how he showed his love, how he fulfilled the vow he had made that first night they met. To take that from him would be to diminish something essential to who he was. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and several great-grandchildren. The family had grown large and prosperous, with descendants scattered across Montana and beyond. But on this special occasion, they all came home to the house that Owen had built, the house where lanterns had burned bright for 4 decades. Adelaide stood to make a toast, her voice still strong despite her advancing years. 40 years ago, I met a man who saw me at my weakest and most afraid. Instead of turning away, he offered me light and protection. He promised to keep my lantern burning bright, and he has honored that promise every single day since then. Owen Irwin, you are the finest man I have ever known, and I am grateful for every moment we have shared. Owen's eyes shone with unshed tears as he raised his glass to her. And I am grateful for you, Adelaide. You took a lonely mountain man and gave him a family, a purpose, a reason to be better than he thought he could be. I would promise you another 40 years if I could, but I will settle for making every remaining day count. The family celebrated late into the night, with music and dancing and stories told about the couple's legendary romance. And when everyone finally departed, Adelaide and Owen sat in their bedroom, surrounded by the gentle glow of their lanterns, and held each other close. We did pretty well, did we not? Owen said quietly. 3 children, 8 grandchildren, 5 great-grandchildren, and counting. A family that loves and respects each other. Not too bad for a scared schoolteacher and a rough mountain man. We did more than well, Adelaide corrected. We built something beautiful, something that will last long after we are gone. Owen kissed her forehead. Because of you. You brought light into my life in more ways than just lanterns, Adelaide. You made everything brighter. They sat together in comfortable silence, 2 people who had spent a lifetime learning to read each other's thoughts and moods. Finally, Adelaide spoke again, her voice soft with emotion. Owen, I need to tell you something. I have thought about this a lot over the years, and I want to make sure you understand. What is it? My fear of the dark has gotten better. Not gone, but better. I could probably manage with fewer lanterns now, maybe even learn to sleep without them. But I have never asked you to stop because those lanterns represent something more important than just light. Owen pulled back slightly to look at her, confusion evident in his weathered face. What do they represent? Your love, Adelaide said simply. Every evening when you light those lanterns, you are telling me that you see my needs and you care about meeting them. You are showing me that I matter, that my comfort is important to you. The lanterns are not just about illumination, Owen. They are about you keeping your promise, about the constancy of your devotion. And I never want that to end. Understanding dawned in Owen's gray eyes, and he pulled Adelaide close again, his strong arms still capable of making her feel completely safe. Then I will keep lighting them, every night for as long as I am able. Because you are right, It is not just about the darkness, it is about loving you the way you deserve to be loved, with actions as well as words. 2 years after their 40th anniversary, Owen suffered a stroke that left him weakened but still mentally sharp. The family gathered, fearing the worst, but Owen proved as tough as the mountains he loved. He recovered enough to walk with a cane and to continue his daily routines, though everything took longer and required more effort. The first evening after returning home from his convalescence, Owen insisted on lighting the lanterns himself despite Adelaide's protests. She watched nervously as he moved slowly through the house, using his cane for support, carefully tending each lamp with shaking hands. "Let me help," Adelaide finally said when he nearly dropped the oil can. "No," Owen said firmly. "I can do this. I need to do this." It took him nearly an hour to light all the lanterns, a task that once would have taken mere minutes. But when he finished, sitting exhausted in his favorite chair, the look of satisfaction on his face was unmistakable. "Still keeping my promise," he said to Adelaide with a tired smile. "Still keeping the lantern burning bright." Adelaide knelt beside his chair, taking his weathered hands in hers. "You have more than kept your promise, my love. You have exceeded it in every possible way." The next few years brought more challenges as Owen's health continued to decline. But through it all, he maintained the evening ritual of lighting the lanterns. Even when his hands shook so badly that lighting a match became a 10-minute ordeal, even when he needed to rest between each room, he persisted. The family learned not to interfere, understanding that this was Owen's way of maintaining his dignity and his identity as Adelaide's protector. Adelaide herself remained relatively healthy, though she moved more slowly and tired more easily. She had long since retired from teaching, but she volunteered at the school library and spent time helping their grandchildren and great-grandchildren with their studies. The house remained the center of family gatherings, and Adelaide loved having multiple generations under her roof. On a crisp October evening in 1919, Owen lit the lanterns for the last time. Adelaide watched from the doorway as he moved through their home, his movements slow but purposeful. When he finished the last one in their bedroom, he turned to her with a smile. "For 43 years, he said softly. "I have been lighting these lanterns for 43 years. That is a good run, Adelaide." Something in his tone made Adelaide's heart clench with sudden fear. "Owen, are you all right?" "I am tired," he admitted. "More tired than I have ever been. But I am also content. I kept my promise to you, Adelaide. Every night I kept the lantern burning bright." They went to bed early that night, curled together as they had been countless times before. Adelaide fell asleep with her head on Owen's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. When she woke in the morning, that heart was still at last. Owen died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, surrounded by light and love, with his wife safe in his arms. His final act had been to fulfill his promise one last time, ensuring Adelaide would never wake to darkness. The funeral was massive, with people traveling from across Montana and beyond to pay their respects to the legendary mountain man. They told stories of his strength and courage, his skill in the wilderness, his unwavering integrity. But the story that resonated most deeply was the one Adelaide told, standing beside his grave with their children and grandchildren surrounding her. "Owen Irwin was known as a mountain man, a trapper, a guide," Adelaide said, her voice strong despite her grief. "But to me, he was simply the man who kept his promise. When I was at my weakest and most afraid, he offered me light and protection, and he continued offering it every day for 43 years, never once failing in his commitment." She paused, looking at the assembled crowd. "Owen taught me that true love is not just grand gestures or passionate declarations. It is showing up every day and doing the small things that matter. It is seeing someone's needs and meeting them without complaint. It is keeping your promises even when it is difficult or inconvenient." Adelaide's eyes swept over her large family, seeing Owen's strength and kindness reflected in all of them. "My husband kept the lantern burning bright for me. Now it is our job to keep his light burning bright by living the way he taught us, with courage, compassion, and unwavering commitment to the people we love." In the months after Owen's death, Adelaide struggled more with the darkness than she had in decades. Without his steady presence, the nights felt longer and more threatening. But their children took turns staying with her, continuing the ritual of lighting the lanterns that their father had begun so long ago. "We will keep your lantern burning bright, Mama," Oliver told her, "just as Pa did. You will never have to be afraid." Adelaide lived for 5 more years after Owen's death, remaining active and engaged with her family despite her grief. She told their story often, wanting the younger generations to understand the kind of love their grandparents had shared. She wanted them to know that real romance was not always dramatic or flashy, but rather the quiet constancy of someone who kept their promises. On a warm spring evening in 1924, Adelaide passed away peacefully in her sleep, in the same bed where she had spent so many years safe in Owen's arms. The lanterns in her room burned bright, lit by her granddaughter Anna, who had been staying with her. They buried Adelaide beside Owen on a hill overlooking their land, with a view of the mountains he had loved and the meadow where their children had played. The simple headstone read, "Adelaide Jenkins Irwin and Owen Oliver Irwin." She was scared of the dark. He promised to keep the lantern burning bright. He kept his promise until death and beyond. The house that Owen built stood for many more decades, passing down through the family. And in every generation, someone kept the tradition of the lanterns alive, lighting them each evening in honor of a mountain man's promise to a frightened schoolteacher. The story was told and retold, becoming a family legend about the power of constant love and kept promises. The town of Hecla itself grew and changed, eventually becoming a proper city. But old-timers still remembered Adelaide and Owen, the schoolteacher who came west despite her fears and the mountain man who loved her for exactly who she was. Their story became part of the town's history, a reminder that the frontier was built not just on physical courage, but on emotional bravery as well. Years later, one of their great-great-granddaughters wrote a book about Adelaide and Owen's love story. It became a bestseller, introducing new generations to the mountain man who had promised to keep the lantern burning bright and the woman who had trusted him enough to believe. But for those who knew them, who had experienced their love firsthand, the real story was in the small moments. It was in Owen's weathered hands carefully tending lamp wicks. It was in Adelaide's smile when she woke each morning surrounded by light. It was in the way they held hands even after 40 years of marriage, and how they still looked at each other as if the other person hung the moon. Their love was not perfect or easy. Adelaide never fully conquered her fear of darkness, and Owen's protectiveness sometimes bordered on overbearing. They argued about money and parenting and 100 other small things that couples argue about. But through it all, they maintained the core of what had brought them together: mutual respect, unwavering commitment, and a determination to face life's challenges together. The lanterns eventually gave way to electric lights as technology advanced, but the family tradition continued. In houses across Montana and beyond, descendants of Adelaide and Owen would turn on every light in their homes at sunset, a tribute to the promise that had founded their family line. And they would tell their children about the mountain man who saw a frightened woman and offered protection, about the love that bloomed from that first act of kindness. In the end, Adelaide and Owen's story was not about conquering fear or becoming something you were not. It was about finding someone who saw you completely, flaws and fears included, and loved you anyway. It was about promises kept and devotion demonstrated through daily actions rather than empty words. It was about building a life together brick by brick, choice by choice, lit lantern by lit lantern. The brass lantern that had belonged to Owen's mother, the one he had given Adelaide on that first night, was preserved as a family heirloom. It passed through the generations, carefully maintained and treasured, and whenever the family gathered for reunions or holidays, someone would light that lantern and set it in the place of honor at the center of the table. The flame would flicker and dance, casting the same warm glow it had on that wagon train so many years ago. And the family would remember. She was scared of the dark. They laughed, but the mountain man said, "I'll keep the lantern burning bright." And he did. For 43 years, through hardship and joy, through raising children and building a life, Owen Irwin kept his promise. He kept Adelaide's lantern burning bright until the very last night of his life. That was the legacy they left behind. Not wealth or fame, but a lesson about the transformative power of constant, committed love. about seeing someone's weakness and offering strength, about keeping your promises even when they require daily sacrifice, about finding light even in the darkest places. Their descendants carried that legacy forward, generation after generation. Some became teachers like Adelaide, others wilderness guides like Owen. But all of them shared the understanding that true strength lay not in fearlessness, but in facing your fears with the support of people who loved you. That real courage meant being vulnerable enough to ask for help and generous enough to provide it. The land that Owen and Adelaide built their home on remained in the family, though the original house eventually had to be replaced. But elements of it were preserved: the carved mantel with Adelaide's name, the sturdy furniture Owen had crafted, and of course, the collection of lanterns that had lit their lives together. These artifacts became touchstones, physical reminders of a love story that had shaped an entire family's understanding of what marriage should be. On the 100th anniversary of Adelaide and Owen's first meeting, the family held a massive reunion at the Montana property. Hundreds of descendants gathered, some traveling from across the country and even from overseas. They shared stories, compared family trees, and marveled at how two people's love had blossomed into such an enormous legacy. As evening fell, they lit lanterns all across the property, placing them in the windows of buildings, hanging them from trees, lining the paths through the meadow. The effect was magical, transforming the landscape into a glowing tribute to Adelaide and Owen's enduring love. Standing on the hill where her ancestors were buried, a great-great-great-granddaughter named Adelaide Sarah spoke to the assembled crowd. "We are here because a mountain man saw a frightened woman and chose kindness over mockery, because he made a promise and kept it faithfully for over 4 decades, because their love was strong enough to weather every storm the frontier could throw at them." She gestured to the lights surrounding them, hundreds of lanterns burning bright against the Montana darkness. "This is what they gave us, not just a family, but an understanding of what love should be. Constant, faithful, protective, generous. They showed us that the measure of a relationship is not in passionate declarations, but in daily demonstrations of care." As the crowd stood surrounded by light, they understood. Adelaide's fear and Owen's promise had created something far bigger than either of them could have imagined on that wagon train so many years ago. They had created a legacy of love that would burn bright for generations to come, a lantern in the darkness guiding their descendants toward lives of courage, compassion, and kept promises. And somewhere, perhaps in the mountain winds or the starlight overhead, Adelaide and Owen's spirits remained together as they had been in life, still keeping watch over the family they had founded and the love that had made it all possible.